Welcome to the strangest map lesson you were never taught. Today, we're looking at 32 self-proclaimed nations that tried to become real countries with flags, passports, armies, royal titles, fake borders, legal loopholes, floating platforms, and sometimes nothing but pure confidence. Some were brave, some were brilliant, some were basically paperwork having a mental breakdown. 1. What do you do when you decide the government over your homeland does not actually have legal authority there? If you are part of the Yidinji people, an indigenous Australian group, you do not just write an angry post online. You declare that authority invalid. In 2014, the sovereign Yidinji government announced its separation from Australia, and they treated it as much more than a symbolic protest. Members gave up Australian citizenship, returned passports and driver's licenses, and began issuing their own documents instead. One leader was even arrested after using Yidinji license plates, because apparently sovereignty gets very real once traffic law enters the chat. Their argument is that the British Crown never lawfully acquired their ancestral land. So, in their view, they are not creating a new country. They are restoring an old one. 2. If you build your dream country at sea, people may admire your vision. Unless those people are the Italian authorities, in which case they may arrive with explosives. In 1967, engineer Giorgio Rosa built a 400-square-meter platform on steel pylons in the Adriatic Sea, just beyond Italy's territorial waters. In 1968, he declared it the independent Republic of Rose Island. It had plans for tourism, a restaurant, a bar, a post office, its own stamps, and Esperanto as the official language, because nothing says practical government like a floating utopia with language homework. Italy did not see charming eccentricity. It saw a possible tax dodge parked offshore. So the military moved in, removed the caretaker, and blew the whole micronation into pieces. Rose Island lasted briefly, but it exited with fireworks nobody requested. 3. In the late 1960s, a group of libertarians looked at government and thought, why argue with it when you can just sail away and invent a better one? That was the idea behind Operation Atlantis. Their plan was spectacularly ambitious. Build a concrete-hulled ship, take it to the Caribbean, anchor it on a seamount, and declare a tax-free nation of pure freedom. They even built the vessel in a New York river and named it Freedom, because subtle branding was clearly not part of the philosophy. After years of effort, the ship finally headed south. Then reality arrived wearing storm clouds. Near the Bahamas, a hurricane smashed into their dream and the concrete ship sank. Their future nation went straight to the ocean floor, proving that even perfect ideology still needs decent marine engineering. 4. In the middle of Copenhagen sits a neighborhood that has spent more than 50 years politely refusing to behave like the rest of Denmark. Freetown, Christiania began in 1971. When squatters, hippies, and assorted anti-establishment souls took over an abandoned military barracks and declared it an autonomous community. Since then, roughly 1,000 residents have lived in this strange legal gray zone, operating by their own local rules and customs. Christiania became famous for handmade houses, colorful street art, music, odd little workshops, and the notoriously open cannabis market on Pusher Street. Danish authorities have alternated between tolerating it, negotiating with it, and cracking down on it, like a parent who keeps saying final warning for half a century. Yet, Christiania survived. It remains a living time capsule of 1970s counterculture, somehow parked inside a modern European capital. 5. Our tour begins in the Nevada desert, where the Republic of Molossia stands proudly, tiny, ridiculous, and absolutely committed to the bit. This micronation is ruled by His Excellency President Kevin Baugh, who runs it like a miniature dictatorship with a flag, laws, customs, and a level of seriousness that makes the joke funnier. Molossia has also been at war with East Germany for decades. The fact that East Germany stopped existing in 1990 is apparently not important enough to stop a good conflict. Its currency, the Valora, is tied to the value of chocolate chip cookie dough, which is both unstable and emotionally convincing. It even has a space program involving model rockets. But the harshest national security rule is the onion ban. Yes, in Molossia, an onion is not dinner prep, it is contraband. 6. If you are going to capture a city and declare a new state, you might as well make it theatrical enough to confuse future historians. Italian poet, war hero, and professional chaos. Engine Gabriele D'Annunzio did exactly that in 1920 when he took control of Fiume and created the Italian Regency of Carnaro. Calling it a government almost feels too normal. It was more like a non-stop political opera with uniforms, speeches, music, ego, and substances doing some very heavy lifting. Its constitution declared music to be a foundation of the state, which is bold because most countries settle for laws and roads. It legalized divorce, promised free musical education, and partly funded itself through piracy. Cocaine circulated under medicinal and spiritual excuses. Carnaro was unstable, absurd, and doomed, but it definitely refused to be boring. 7. Some people want a house, some want a kingdom. James Thomas Mangan of Illinois looked up in 1949 and decided the correct amount of real estate was the entire universe. He founded the nation of celestial space, also called Celestia, by filing a claim to outer space at his local courthouse. His logic was a strange cocktail of idealism and cosmic ego. He said he wanted to stop earthly nations from grabbing planets, moons, and stars for themselves. So naturally, he solved that problem by claiming all of it first. Very humble. Mangan informed the United Nations, the United States, and the Soviet Union that the cosmos now belonged to Celestia. He even issued passports to the Apollo astronauts. Did Celestia have actual power? Absolutely not. But the audacity was orbiting at maximum altitude. 8. Sometimes a country is born from revolution. Sometimes it is born because two bigger powers basically forgot to include you on the paperwork. That is how the Republic of Cospaia happened. In 1440, the Papal States and the Republic of Florence were settling a border agreement, but a tiny strip of land containing the village of Cospaia slipped through the legal cracks. Nobody claimed it. The villagers noticed this glorious administrative faceplant and did the most reasonable thing possible. They declared independence. For nearly 400 years, Cospaia existed as a tiny republic with very little formal law and one major economic advantage. It could grow tobacco without paying the usual taxes. Naturally, it became a haven for smugglers, traders, and people who enjoyed loopholes with a side of nicotine. In 1826, its accidental freedom finally ended peacefully. 9. During the California Gold Rush, the miners of Rough and Ready had a problem with the United States government, and that problem was taxes. In 1850, a new levy on mining profits made them furious enough to do what every calm, financially responsible community does: secede. On April 7th, they voted to leave the United States and formed the Republic of Rough and Ready. For about 3 months, they were their own sovereign nation, proudly free from federal interference. Then the consequences arrived with a party hat. As an independent country, they could not properly celebrate the 4th of July. Even worse, local saloons realized buying alcohol from the United States had suddenly become legally complicated. Faced with no patriotic explosions and a possible booze shortage, the citizens reversed course and rejoined the Union. Freedom is great, but not at the cost of drinks. 10. Out in the cold waters of the North Sea sits an old World War II anti-aircraft platform. To most people, it looks like rust, concrete, and bad weather having a meeting. To the Bates family, it became the Principality of Sealand. In 1967, former British Army Major Paddy Roy Bates occupied the abandoned fort, which stood beyond British territorial waters, and declared it a sovereign nation. Sealand has a flag, currency, titles, and a backstory that sounds like someone rejected it from an action movie for being too much. In 1978, a German businessman helped launch a coup, and Bates's son was taken hostage. Bates responded with a helicopter counterattack, retook the platform, and captured the invaders. Sealand may be tiny, but it proved one thing very clearly: never underestimate a man whose house is literally a fortress. 11. In 1980, the island of Espiritu Santo was about to become part of the newly independent nation of Vanuatu. But some local separatists, helped by questionable American business interests dreaming of a tax haven, had other plans. They announced the Republic of Wemarana, led by the charismatic Jimmy Stevens. This was not just a flag and speech situation. It turned into an armed uprising known as the Coconut War, which sounds like a tropical comedy until you remember it was an actual political crisis. The rebels, many armed with bows, arrows, clubs, and traditional weapons, took control of the island. Eventually, troops from Papua New Guinea helped crush the rebellion. Wemarana collapsed, but its story remains one of the strangest post-colonial conflicts ever. Part independence movement, part land rights struggle, part libertarian fantasy, and part absolute geopolitical fever dream. 12. Redonda is a rocky Caribbean island with almost no practical value unless you happen to be a seabird or deeply invested in literary drama. Somehow, it became the center of one of the strangest kingdoms in history. The Kingdom of Redonda traces its story to the 19th century, but it became especially weird when science fiction writer E.M. P. Shiel was supposedly crowned king. After that, the throne became less a royal inheritance and more a prize passed through writers, poets, and intellectuals with extremely serious feelings about a useless rock. Rival claimants emerged, creating competing dynasties and decades of literary feuds. These were not wars with armies. They were wars of letters, essays, poems, and magnificent pettiness. Redonda proves that writers do not need land to fight like monarchs. A title and some ego will do. 13. In Vilnius, Lithuania, there is a neighborhood that declared independence on April Fool's Day and somehow made it charming instead of annoying. The Republic of Užupis began in 1997 as an artistic joke, but it grew into a beloved local tradition. This bohemian district has its own president, its own bishop, a tiny army of about 12 people, and even official dogs, because apparently every serious country needs canine representation. Its real masterpiece is the Užupis Constitution, displayed publicly in many languages. It includes lines saying everyone has the right to be happy, everyone has the right to be unhappy, a dog has the right to be a dog, and everyone has the right to misunderstand. That last one may be the most honest law ever written. Užupis is less a country than a beautiful permission slip to be weird. 14. Wheat quotas sound like the kind of policy dispute that should end in a boring meeting, not a new country. But Leonard Casley, a farmer in Western Australia, had a much more dramatic interpretation. In 1970, after government limits threatened how much wheat he could sell, he declared his 75-square-kilometer farm independent and founded the Principality of Hutt River. He became Prince Leonard, leaned on obscure legal arguments, and insisted his secession was legitimate. For 50 years, the Casley family ran Hutt River like a tiny sovereign state, issuing passports, stamps, and currency while attracting curious tourists from around the world. Australia never recognized the claim, which did not stop the principality from acting impressively official. The standoff finally ended in 2020, when financial pressure and a huge tax bill helped bring this farmer kingdom back down to earth. 15. In the 1950s, former sailor and free spirit Eli Avivi settled among the ruins of an abandoned Arab village on Israel's Mediterranean coast. In 1971, when the Israeli government tried to demolish the remaining structures, Avivi responded with the kind of move only a true counterculture legend would attempt. He declared the place an independent state called Sealand. Instead of simply being removed, he fought back in court and actually won a 99-year lease on the land. That gave his strange little nation a surprisingly durable foundation. Sealand developed its own flag, passport stamps, and a president for life, because apparently one-man beach countries also need executive branding. For decades, it became a famous hippie destination, confusing border guards and delighting travelers. It began as squatting, but somehow became a lasting coastal oddity. 16. When two powerful neighbors cannot agree on a border, the people stuck in the middle may eventually decide to stop waiting and become a country themselves. That is what happened with the Republic of Indian Stream. After the American Revolution, a small territory between New Hampshire and Quebec was left in a messy dispute between the United States and British-controlled Canada. Around 300 residents got tired of the uncertainty and, in 1832, created their own independent republic. They wrote a constitution, formed a government, and handled local affairs like a proper frontier mini-state. For 3 years, Indian Stream lived in political limbo, neither fully American nor Canadian, but very determined. Then both sides started pushing harder, tensions rose, and the New Hampshire militia eventually marched in and annexed it. A tiny republic vanished, mostly because maps are apparently dangerous. 17. Most teenagers turn their bedrooms into messy kingdoms of laundry, snacks, and suspicious smells. In 1979, 14-year-old Robert Ben Madison turned his Wisconsin bedroom into the Kingdom of Thalassa. What started as a private imagination project became one of the most elaborate micronations ever created. Madison did not stop at drawing a flag and calling himself important. He built an entire culture, complete with politics, traditions, and even a constructed language called Thalassan. That language eventually grew into a massive dictionary with more than 28,000 words, which is either impressive or a warning sign depending on your tolerance for teenage ambition. As the internet expanded, Thalassa gained citizens from around the world. It developed parties, arguments, institutions, and even a civil war, all from a bedroom. Truly, nerd energy can become geopolitics if left unsupervised. 18. The United States of Kailasa might be the strangest example of a country that has no clear territory, but somehow managed to appear on the international stage anyway. It was created by controversial Indian guru Nithyananda, who fled India while facing serious criminal allegations. Kailasa presents itself as a borderless Hindu nation for displaced Hindus, which sounds spiritual and abstract until representatives start showing up at diplomatic events in Geneva. And yes, people claiming to represent Kailasa attended United Nations committee meetings, delivering statements about persecution and human rights, while actual diplomats were left wondering whether anyone had checked the guest list. The whole thing exists largely through websites, ceremony, branding, and confidence delivered at industrial strength. Kailasa is a reminder that in modern diplomacy, sometimes a flag, a website, and enough nerve can get you disturbingly far. 19. After World War I, Eastern Europe was a mess of collapsing empires, shifting borders, armed groups, and general, please do not invade us today energy. In that chaos, the Lithuanian village of Perloja decided survival required more than hope. In 1918, the villagers created the Republic of Perloja to protect themselves from bandits, rogue soldiers, and whatever disaster wandered down the road next. This was not a joke or a tourism gimmick. Perloja established a government, a court, a jail, its own money, and a local army of about 300 men. For several years, this tiny village state defended its territory and managed its own affairs. It was not built for vanity, utopia, or tax avoidance. It was built because ordinary people needed order when the official world around them had basically fallen off the table. 20. When Austrian artist Edwin Lippberger built a perfectly spherical house, local authorities had one major problem with it: paperwork, specifically building permits. Lippberger responded in the most artistically excessive way possible by declaring the house an independent country. The Republic of Kugelmugel was born from an 8-meter-wide ball-shaped home and a deep hatred of bureaucracy. He surrounded the sphere with barbed wire, issued stamps, and insisted it was sovereign territory. The Austrian government, shockingly, did not accept "my house is now a nation" as a valid zoning argument. Lippberger was even jailed for refusing to pay taxes. Eventually, the spherical structure was moved to Vienna's Praterpark, where it still stands. Kugelmugel is now a round, stubborn monument to one man's war against forms, permits, and the cruel tyranny of right angles. 21. The Sovereign Military Order of Malta is one of the weirdest recognized sovereign entities in existence because it is basically a country with almost no country. This Catholic religious order dates back to the Crusades, which already gives it a historical resume, longer than most actual states. The strange part is that it is recognized under international law, while its territory is essentially limited to 2 buildings in Rome with special extraterritorial status. Yet the order issues passports, prints stamps, maintains diplomatic relations with over 100 countries, and holds permanent observer status at the United Nations. It has no normal homeland, no sprawling capital, and no ordinary population in the usual sense. Still, it survives as a sovereign relic with excellent connections. Apparently, in diplomacy, land is helpful. But centuries of history and prestige can do a lot of heavy lifting. 22. The Antarctic Treaty says countries cannot claim sovereignty over Antarctica. But when Travis McHenry looked at the fine print in 2001, he noticed something interesting. It did not really say what private individuals could not try. So he claimed a huge unclaimed portion of the continent and founded the Grand Duchy of West Arctica. The territory he announced was larger than Mexico, which is a bold amount of ice for one person to casually place on his imaginary national letterhead. McHenry declared himself Grand Duke and framed the project partly around environmental protection. No government recognizes West Arctica, but it has all the theatrical accessories: titles, currency, citizens, coats of arms, and a polished official presence. It is nation-building in the world's coldest legal loophole, where the main exports appear to be penguins, paperwork, and confidence. 23. Richard Soa had a dream in the 1970s. Build a private island, declare it a country, and live in eco-friendly independence. Unfortunately, his chosen building material was millions of old car tires, because apparently paradise needed to smell like a highway shoulder. He bundled tires together in nets to form a floating base for what he planned to call the United States of Isla. The idea was part environmental experiment, part personal utopia, and part engineering decision that should have caused every nearby fish to hire a lawyer. Then a storm arrived and delivered the performance review. The structure broke apart, scattering enormous numbers of tires into the sea. The island never became a nation, but it did leave behind a serious environmental mess on the ocean floor. Not every dream should float, and some definitely should not be made of tires. 24. Most people who get denied a bank loan complain, switch banks, or quietly lose faith in financial institutions. The family behind the Principality of Snake Hill went several steps further and founded a country. After a dispute with their bank, this Australian family declared their property independent, because apparently the correct answer to banking frustration is constitutional monarchy. Their micronation came complete with royal titles, including Royal Highness Princess Paula, and a proudly sovereign attitude. Over time, they added the usual micronation accessories: their own currency, ceremonial identity, and even a collection of antique military vehicles that they call their army. There are also old coins, titles, and enough symbolism to make the whole thing feel impressively committed. Snake Hill is what happens when financial rage stops being a complaint and becomes a national founding myth. 25. The Conch Republic was born from one of the least majestic causes in nation-building history: a traffic jam. In 1982, the United States Border Patrol set up a roadblock on the highway linking the Florida Keys to the mainland, searching for drugs and undocumented immigrants. The result was terrible gridlock, which badly hurt the Keys' tourism economy. Key West Mayor Dennis Wardlow tried to fight the roadblock in court and lost. So he escalated beautifully. He declared the Florida Keys independent, announced war on the United States, symbolically attacked a federal agent with a stale loaf of Cuban bread, and surrendered about 1 minute later while requesting $1 billion in foreign aid. The roadblock was removed, and the Conch Republic became a beloved annual celebration. Few rebellions have achieved so much with so little bread-based violence. 26. The Kingdom of the Cocos Islands sounds like tropical fantasy, but for the workers who lived under it, the arrangement was much less charming. In 1827, Scottish merchant John Clunies Ross settled on the remote Cocos Islands in the Indian Ocean and built a private domain around coconut plantations. He brought in workers from Malaysia, paid them in a currency usable mainly at his own company store, and ruled the islands like a personal kingdom. The Clunies-Ross family held power for 5 generations, creating a strange feudal bubble that survived into the modern world long after it should have been filed under "How is this still happening?" Eventually, the dynasty ended not through revolution but through sale. In 1978, the family sold the islands to Australia for several $million. Thus ended the reign of the Coconut Kings. 27. The Republic of Minerva was a textbook libertarian fantasy. Find unclaimed space, build a new country, remove taxes, and enjoy freedom with ocean views. In 1972, wealthy activist Michael Oliver tried to make this real by dredging sand onto the Minerva Reefs in the Pacific south of Fiji. He managed to create a small artificial island, raise a flag, and declare a new nation. For a brief moment, it looked like someone had actually manufactured sovereignty with sand and optimism. Then Tonga noticed. King Taufa Ahau Tupu IV was not amused by a self-declared state appearing in his region like a suspicious pop-up ad. Tonga sent a force to the reefs, claimed them, and removed the Minerva flag. The dream of a no-tax paradise lasted only months before colliding with a much older political concept: nearby countries with soldiers. 28. Some nations rise over centuries. The state of malaria appeared and vanished in roughly the time it takes most governments to schedule one useless committee meeting. After World War I, a group of Serbian veterans claimed a small uninhabited island in the Danube River, a disputed spot between Hungary and the newly formed Yugoslavia. In 1920, they founded a state called Malaria, which was probably a grim joke about the island's mosquito-infested misery. They elected a president and hoped to be recognized as legitimate. Unfortunately, their timing was catastrophically bad. Only days later, the island was officially awarded to Hungary. Hungarian police arrived, removed the Serbian veterans, and ended the whole experiment without a fight. Malaria's national history was short, swampy, and deeply unpleasant, which at least made the name brutally honest. 29. Lester Hemingway, brother of Ernest Hemingway, clearly felt that the family talent for dramatic adventure needed a sequel. In 1964, he built a tiny bamboo raft, anchored it to an old engine block in shallow water near Jamaica, and declared the independent nation of New Atlantis. At its peak, the population was about 6 people, which is less a country and more an awkward dinner table. Still, Hemingway took it seriously. He wrote a constitution, designed a flag, and sold New Atlantis stamps to help fund marine research. There was even a plan to expand the floating state into something more substantial. Then, nature reviewed the proposal. A tropical storm destroyed the bamboo platform, sending the newborn nation into the sea. New Atlantis proved that sovereignty is hard when your capital city is basically a raft with ambitions. 30. When New Zealand redrew regional boundaries, the tiny town of Wangamomona found itself placed in a region it did not want to belong to. Instead of quietly accepting the change, the locals responded with pure, rural theatrical genius. In 1989, they declared themselves the Republic of Wangamomona as a protest against distant bureaucrats and their map-making habits. Then the whole thing became delightfully absurd. Their presidential elections produced legends, including Billy the Goat, who reportedly won after eating rival ballots. Honestly, that is one way to handle campaign strategy. Billy served for years before his death, and later a poodle named Ty became president, surviving an assassination attempt by another dog. Today, Republic Day draws thousands of visitors. A protest against bureaucracy somehow became the town's greatest tourist attraction, because weirdness sells better than paperwork. 31. Seborga looks like a lovely Italian village on the Ligurian coast, but many locals insist it has a secret constitutional twist. They say it was never properly absorbed into Italy during 19th century unification. According to this claim, Seborga remains a sovereign principality by historical oversight. The idea was revived in the 1960s by a local flower grower and then embraced with impressive enthusiasm. Seborga elects its own prince, flies its own flag, mints a local currency called the Luigino, and maintains a volunteer army that seems more charming than threatening. Italy, unsurprisingly, does not recognize any of this and continues collecting taxes like nothing magical happened. But Seborga keeps the story alive anyway. It is a country in local imagination, civic identity, and tourist appeal, even if legally it remains very much inside Italy. 32. Most empires begin with conquest, armies, and huge maps painted in alarming colors. Atlantium began in 1981 with 3 teenagers in suburban Sydney and a level of ambition wildly disproportionate to the available land. The Empire of Atlantium calls itself a global sovereign state, but its physical territory is a tiny 61 square meter patch in New South Wales. That makes it possibly the least terrifying empire ever announced by humans. Its self-proclaimed ruler, Emperor George II, promotes a progressive global agenda, including free movement of people and decimal time, because apparently clocks also needed regime change. While Atlantium's territory is smaller than many apartments, it has attracted thousands of online citizens from more than 100 countries. It is imperialism for the internet age. No colonies, no battles, just a website, a flag, and extreme confidence. So, which fake country deserved to become real, and which one should have been shut down immediately before someone printed another passport? Drop your most controversial pick in the comments, and if we missed an even weirder self-proclaimed nation, name it. If this video gave you at least one "how is that legal" moment, hit like and subscribe, because history clearly has not finished embarrassing itself.